The Synchro-Mystic presents Synchro-Mystique. The good people of the British Isles are preparing to crown King Charles III on Saturday, May the 6th, 2023, with the help of what some regard as a holy rock. This procedure will make formal, or should we say ceremonial, what has been the de facto and official royal situation since the Saturday following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. As the British Broadcasting Company explains, at the moment the Queen died, the throne passed immediately and without ceremony to the heir, Charles, the former Prince of Wales. But there are a number of traditional steps he must go through to be crowned king. That the event will be attended by pomp and circumstance is, as you may well imagine, a foregone conclusion. But amid the grand, or grandiose, costumes and customs, one element may seem out of place. For positioned right below the guest of honor, presumably in full view as the seldom-seen liturgy builds to its magnificent crescendo, will sit a rather odd, if non-ordained, concelebrant. At first blush, the object in question appears just an ordinary-looking chunk of sandstone, but the British press refers to the, quote, sacred artifact as an ancient symbol of Scottish sovereignty. Once upon a time, Charles's Coronation Chair was custom-made to fit the mystic mass in its lowermost compartment. That's where it was when Queen Elizabeth II was crowned in 1953, and that's where it will be Saturday. The rock in question is a nondescript slab with crude chiseling, possibly remains of some insignia, and featuring iron rings, the latter of unknown manufacture and purpose. The mystery surrounding the rings is a fitting embellishment, given the overall obscurity of the stone. According to one archaic legend, the Stone of Destiny, as it's called, originated in biblical times. In this story, the current Coronation Stone is the same rock used as a pillow by the Hebrew patriarch Jacob, when, on his way to Haran, he decamped on the plain of Luz. The biblical book of Genesis, chapter 8, verse 11, states that Jacob took one of the stones and placed it under his head and lay down to sleep. Subsequently, to borrow a phrase popularized by the British-based rock and roll band Led Zeppelin, Jacob dreamt of a stairway to heaven. While he slept, this father of the future Israelites had a vision. He saw angels mysteriously ascending and descending between heaven and earth. Meanwhile, from on high, a voice proclaimed to him, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying." Besides its obvious importance for the religion of Judaism, this episode is commemorated in various esoteric systems, including Freemasonry, where it is represented by a cryptic symbol termed Jacob's Ladder. According to Masonic encyclopedist Albert Mackey, this ladder, so remarkable in the history of the Jewish people, finds its analog in all the ancient initiations. Mackey proceeds to connect Jacob's Ladder with myriad multi-step systems of mystery school inductions from alchemy and Kabbalah to Mithraism and, of course, Freemasonry itself. According to some, Jacob's pillow stone was that makeshift altar on which Abraham had intended sacrificing Isaac. The morning following his dream, Jacob consecrated the spot and renamed it Bethel. Bet-El literally means house of God. The text says that Jacob, who later adopted the moniker Israel, turned his pillow stone into a pillar. Taking a contrary position, some Islamic and Jewish sources tend to identify Jacob's pillar with the foundation stone that currently serves as centerpiece underneath the Dome of the Rock, itself part of the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex in Jerusalem. In any case, according to researcher Philip Neal, there is an alternate tradition that Jacob's pillar was to be included as a cornerstone in the building of Solomon's temple, but the builders rejected the stone because of its crack. Some further assert that the Bethel stone was carried by the Israelites into Egypt, The previously quoted Neil supposes that Jacob's esteemed pillar would not only have been taken to Egypt, it would also have been carried throughout their 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. Neil concludes, writing, "Presumably it stayed in Jerusalem from the time of David until the fall of the nation in 586 BC. Albert Pike, longtime chief of the Scottish Rite, whom we discussed in Top 10 Occultists, further identified the Mithraic ladder with a 7-stage pyramid. Of course, echoes of this appear on the reverse side of the Great Seal of the United States, where, among other visual elements, we find a truncated pyramid with 13 levels. The original Bethel stone then is said to have made its way to Europe. Accounts vary. In one version of the tale, the rock went from Palestine to Egypt, where one Gathalus, son of an Athenian king, transferred it to Spain, or to Brigantia. Some date this event to near the time of Moses. On this wavelength, the Scottish link emerges in the personage of Simon Breck, son of Milo the Scot, who, circa 700 BC, moved the stone to Ireland, where it took on the august label, the Stone of Destiny. Realize that at one time the label, Scot, referred indiscriminately to the ancestors of groups that we now distinguish as Irish and Scottish. For example, the 9th century Christian Neoplatonist John Scotus Erigena was from Ireland, whereas the 13th century scholastic philosopher known as Duns Scotus was born in Scotland. But the stone didn't make its way into Scotland as we think of it today until roughly the 6th century, when it was transported there by King Fergus. Then, Kenneth MacAlpin secured the stone's association with Scone by taking it there around AD 840. Though if I understand correctly, Scone is pronounced more along the lines of Scone by locals. All the kings of Scotland were crowned upon the stone until it was removed by English King Edward I and brought to Westminster Abbey. Edward had the oak coronation chair made especially to hold the stone. Dating to the early 14th century, the chair itself has been called probably the oldest piece of furniture still in use in England. It was first used for the coronation of his son Edward II in 1308. Despite putting the stone into the chair as a symbol of his conquest, Edward's rule over Scotland was short-lived. Robert the Bruce led the rebellion that saw him crowned King of Scotland in 1306. As a flourish, we remind viewers that Robert the Bruce is sometimes said to have been aided in his revolt by a faction of the Knights Templar. The details would take us too far afield presently. But according to a different overall narrative, popularized by the so-called British Israelite movement, Jacob's pillar was carried to the British Isles by no less a character than the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah. Part of the alleged belt of transmission was one Tea Tephi, mythical daughter of Zedekiah, the final king of Judah. You'll recall that Judah's previously noted destruction, circa 587 BC, was precipitated by the Neo-Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Tephi was then believed to have become the Queen of Ireland. What does it all add up to? One anonymous author starkly concludes that the British monarch is a descendant of Israel's King David. The proof's in the God-anointed power of the stone. The story goes that the Stone of Destiny had the capacity to generate audible sounds, which earned it the nickname the Stone That Speaks. Besides the basic historical questions surrounding the origin and movements of the stone, highlights of which we have just now rehearsed, there are also speculations that veer into cloak and dagger territory. Lingering questions include, were the English bamboozled into seizing a fake stone? According to some theorists, the Scots had the foresight to spirit the genuine stone away from Scone and hide it before it fell into conquering English hands. Or, assuming that the English actually took it in the first place, had the genuine stone been stolen from Westminster Abbey? On Christmas Day in 1950, 4 people, variously described as Scottish nationals or students, supposedly broke into Westminster Abbey. The story goes that they not only absconded with the stone, but they conspired to swap it with a replica. Therefore, the real Stone of Destiny was never returned to Greater London. A variant asks, did the English return the real McCoy to the Scots? Or is the alleged Stone of Destiny that's lately been on display in Edinburgh Castle the fake? Remember that on St. Andrew's Day in 1996, then British Prime Minister John Major made a show of turning the Stone of Scone back over to Scotland. Perhaps they kept the genuine rock and passed off a duplicate, on the assumption that the media reporting was veridical, a dicey proposition to be sure. We note that its reinstallation in Scotland came with an important proviso. Namely, the British reserved their claimed privilege of retrieving the Stone of Destiny to conduct future coronations. Such an occurrence is at hand. Though we're told that given the stone's history and significance, the exact details of when and how it will be transported are a closely guarded secret. The pageantry will involve the Archbishop of Canterbury, currently one Justin Welby. The bishop's middle name, Portal, synchronistically and uncannily recalls the Masonic interpretation of Jacob's ladder. For portal is a perfectly respectable synonym for each of the series of gateways through which candidates pass on their journeys to spiritual enlightenment. And it's worth pointing out that coronation, both as an idea and a word, contains embedded within it the root corona, which has been so prominent these last few years. I won't take time to develop this connection here, since I have already devoted at least 4 videos to it. Also interesting is the anticipated participation of members of the chivalric order known as the Knights of the Garter. This much debated, most noble order, whose French motto, Honi soit que mal y pense, is sometimes translated evil to him who evil thinks, includes the now humiliated Prince Andrew. Andrew's tarnished reputation is mainly due to his widely reported associations with disgraced and now deceased American financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, the present British king himself, back in his more youthful days as Prince Charles, cultivated an indeterminately close relationship with the now deceased radio and television personality Jimmy Savile. Posthumous revelations have cemented Savile's notoriety as perhaps the most prolific rapist and sex offender Britain has ever seen. Of course, that didn't prevent him from becoming Sir James Wilson Vincent Savile when he was personally knighted in 1990 by Queen Elizabeth. Oh, and Savile was also a reputed Satanist. We gesture toward some related chicanery in our previous Top 10 Sex Magic Cults. But as to the Stone of Destiny, offbeat videographer Christian Pinto muses over further possibilities in his impressive Eye of the Phoenix production. Pinto directs our attention to the legend of the Holy Grail. He highlights Grail lore as it was communicated in the late 12th century Germanic knight and poet Wolfram von Eschenbach's romance, Parzival. Citing a possibly fictional troubadour, Eschenbach relates, via Parzival's uncle, that the Holy Grail itself is some sort of stone. Eschenbach's story further relates the association between the Grail Stone and the biblical battle between the Archangel Michael and the chief of the fallen angels. The previously mentioned director Pinto relates that there is an arcane link between the Stone of Destiny and the crown jewels of Lucifer, who supposedly had his coronet damaged in the epic battle during which he was expelled from heaven. On this, the final variant of our tangled story, the true Stone of Destiny may be wholly or partially composed of greenish meteorite remnants called moldavite, recovered from the Moldavia River in the Czech Republic. Moldavite is the residue of an impact that geologists date to some 15 million years ago. Admittedly, one geologic analysis of the Coronation Stone described it as basically a sandstone, a conglomeration of feldspar, flint, hornblende, mica, slate, and quartz. Despite the glaring discrepancy between the Coronation Stone and moldavite, there remains a noteworthy sync, or lexi-link, between the latter and Britain's newest monarch. Moldavia, you see, seems to be a variant name of the Moldau or Vltava River near Prague, and it is a close and confusing cousin to what appears to be a similarly named river in the province of Moldavia. Along with Dobrodija and Wallachia, this Moldavia, now more commonly called Moldova, is part of a set of territories making up modern-day Romania. This interlocking set of geopolitical areas also includes Transylvania, And here we conclude this strange excursus with a last observation about the man who will be the focus of the coronation, King Charles III. According to the book Royal Highness, King Charles is a great-grandson 16 times removed to the notorious Transylvanian ruler Vlad the Impaler. This makes King Charles, in the words of this London Telegraph article, heir to Dracula's bloodline. Even more astonishingly, it was reported a year previously that Charles seemed quite amused by his dark lineage, and spent more than a decade in Transylvania, where he had been restoring centuries-old houses and farm sites for unspecified uses. Not listed among the prince's projects, although it was illustrated in the article, was the foreboding Bran Castle, home of previously mentioned great-great-granddaddy Vlad the Impaler. To add a little more context, consider the following disturbing item. According to the book Mummies, Cannibals, and Vampires, well-off and well-educated Brits used to eat human flesh, blood, and bones as medicine. This included Charles II, and Queen Mary and William III were said to be in on the act too. No word on whether the former's namesake, King Charles III, ever had similar predilections, though one British tabloid reported in 2012 that then Prince Charles and Camilla were to brave 1,000 cannibals on their Diamond Jubilee tour. One does wonder who was in danger, the royal couple or the islanders. Just something to think about while you're watching Charles level up on the Stone of Destiny. Of course, further questions present themselves, such as, was the real Power Stone carried to America? But that will have to wait for another time.